All right, so we're diving in today, and you send over a bunch of articles about Elon Musk,
Yeah.
but there's a twist this time. It's not about rockets or Twitter or even like his feud with the UN or whatever.
Right.
This is about video games.
Yeah. It's definitely an unexpected angle.
So we've got Newsweek, The Guardian, the New York Times, even the Times of India,
Wow.
and even some like academic papers are weighing in on this. So this isn't just like, gamer gossip.
No. It is fascinating, though, how this went from a very niche online debate to a global news story.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So what's the deal? You've probably seen the headlines, but for our listeners, let's break it down.
Yeah.
Musk claims to be like a top-ranked player in Diablo 4
Mhm.
and Path of Exile 2, which are two seriously hardcore online games.
Yeah, games that demand an insane amount of time and skill to master. We're talking hundreds of hours, dedicated strategies, the whole 9 yards.
Right. So imagine you're a dedicated player of these games. You've poured in the time, the ins and outs.
Yeah.
Then Musk comes along and it's like, oh yeah, I'm at the top of the leaderboards.
Yeah. Right.
But his gameplay doesn't match up.
It's almost like seeing a pro athlete bragging about their marathon time, but then tripping over their own feet in a casual jog.
Exactly. And that's where these accusations of cheating come in.
Right.
Players started comparing like his performance on official leaderboards versus independent ones, and things weren't adding up.
Yeah.
Some even pointed to his live streams as evidence, and were like, he just doesn't have the skills to be a top-ranked player.
And the comments from the gaming community got pretty brutal.
Oh, really?
One article you sent quotes a player saying, "This is a middle schooler book report level of trying to fake it."
Oh.
Another one said, "A lifetime of taking credit for other people's work has led to this." They were not holding back.
Wow, that's got to sting. Even for a billionaire. So why are people so riled up? I mean, it's just a game, right?
Well, on the surface, yeah, but this goes deeper than just someone bending the rules in a virtual world.
Okay.
It ties into Musk's carefully cultivated image.
Oh.
He's the tech genius, the innovator, the guy who works harder than anyone else. Cheating, even in a game, kind of clashes with that, don't you think?
Yeah, it puts like a dent in the always striving for excellence persona. And it makes you wonder, if he's willing to cut corners in something like this, does it bleed into other areas of his life?
That's the question a lot of people are asking.
Mm.
And it brings up a bigger point about trust and authenticity, especially online. We're constantly bombarded with these curated images and perfect highlight reels. So when someone like Musk, who's built this image of being real and different, gets caught up in something like this,
Yeah.
it makes you question everything.
It erodes that trust, and that's something that's really hard to rebuild. Now, what's interesting to me is how Musk himself has reacted to all of this, or rather hasn't reacted.
Yes, his silence on the matter is quite telling.
Yeah.
Since the controversy erupted, he's gone quiet on the gaming front. No more live streams, no more boasts about his high scores.
I mean, he's usually pretty vocal on social media, right?
Yay.
So what do you make of this a sudden radio silence? Is he hoping it'll all just blow over?
That's certainly one possibility. Maybe he's thinking, ignore it and it'll go away. Or maybe there's a more calculated strategy at play here. He's known for his carefully crafted online persona, so this could be a deliberate move to control the narrative. By not engaging directly, he avoids giving the accusations more oxygen.
It's like a magician's misdirection trick.
Mm-hmm.
While everyone's focused on the gaming drama,
Right.
he can quietly shift attention to something else, something more advantageous to him.
It's a tactic we see often in politics and media.
Oh, interesting.
Create a distraction, a smaller controversy to draw attention away from a bigger issue.
Oh, I see.
Which brings us to another layer of this whole saga, Musk's increasing involvement in U.S. politics.
Right. His role as an advisor to President-elect Trump, specifically leading this government efficiency initiative.
Mm-hmm.
And let's not forget his online presence, which has become increasingly, let's just say, outspoken.
Outspoken is one way to put it, attacking politicians, spreading misinformation, aligning himself with far-right figures. It's been quite a shift from his earlier, more optimistic online persona.
Yeah, it feels like he's deliberately courting controversy,
Yeah.
playing this game of outrage and provocation.
Yeah.
But why? What's the end game here?
To understand that, we need to look at some of his recent actions,
Okay.
particularly his attacks on certain British politicians. You sent some articles about his involvement in the grooming gangs controversy in the UK, which is a very sensitive and complex issue.
Okay, before we go any further, maybe we should take a step back and explain what this grooming gangs controversy is all about for those who might not be familiar with it.
You're absolutely right. It's important to provide some context here. Essentially, the term grooming gangs refers to organized groups of individuals who sexually exploit children and young people. In the UK, there have been several high-profile cases involving such gangs, and they've become a focal point for heated debates about race, religion, and immigration.
Right, and this is where Musk kind of jumps into the fray,
Yeah.
using his platform to amplify certain narratives and attack specific individuals. He's been particularly vocal about Keir Starmer and Jess Phillips, two British politicians who have been outspoken on issues of child protection and women's rights.
And it's the way he frames his attacks that's particularly interesting.
Okay.
He positions himself as a defender of vulnerable girls, accusing these politicians of ignoring or downplaying the issue of grooming gangs.
But here's the thing, though. While he's claiming to be a champion for women's safety,
Right.
he's simultaneously supporting figures who have been accused of misogyny and violence against women. That seems pretty contradictory, don't you think?
It's a glaring inconsistency, and it reveals a deeper layer to his motivations. This brings us back to the concept of protection without care,
Yep.
a term used by one of the experts you sent an article from. They argue that Musk's stance on this issue isn't about genuine concern for women's safety, but rather it's a way to exploit a sensitive issue for political gain.
So it's not really about protecting women, but more about aligning himself with a certain ideology, a certain worldview.
Exactly. It's about tapping into existing fears and anxieties, about painting a picture of us versus them, where he gets to be the hero who swoops in to protect the innocent.
I see.
And this aligns with a broader trend we're seeing, not just with Musk, but with other tech leaders as well.
You're talking about that race to the bottom we mentioned earlier, with figures like Zuckerberg promoting masculine culture and scaling back diversity initiatives.
Precisely. There seems to be a growing appeal of hypermasculinity in certain segments of society, and these tech leaders are tapping into that sentiment. They're promoting this idea of the strong, assertive, even aggressive leader who doesn't shy away from controversy. And it's finding a receptive audience, particularly among young men who are feeling disillusioned or disenfranchised.
So are we saying that Musk is deliberately cultivating this hypermasculine image as a way to gain political influence? That seems like a pretty cynical strategy.
Well, it's certainly something to consider. And it raises the question of what kind of influence he's actually wielding. Some of the articles you sent suggest that his power might be waning,
Really?
despite his financial contributions to Trump's campaign.
But then others point to his continued presence at Mar-a-Lago and his potential influence on policy decisions. So what's the reality here? Is he a fading force or a puppet master pulling strings behind the scenes?
It's difficult to say for sure. There's a lot of speculation and conflicting information out there. But what we can say is that his actions are having a real impact, both in the U.S. and beyond. His involvement in the grooming gangs controversy has sparked outrage and debate in the U.K.
Yeah.
And his meddling in Australian politics has earned him a sharp rebuke from Prime Minister Albanese.
It seems like he's trying to exert his influence on a global scale.
Yeah.
Inserting himself into political debates in countries where he has no real stake. And that brings up some serious questions about accountability and the role of these tech billionaires in the world.
It's a discussion we definitely need to have. But I think we've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive. Maybe it's a good time to pause and let you, our listener, digest all this information. We'll be back in a moment to delve even deeper into the world of Elon Musk, gaming, and the complex web of politics, misinformation, and online culture.
Okay, so before we went on that little tangent, we were talking about how Musk is using this protector without care narrative,
Right.
especially when it comes to this whole grooming gangs situation in the UK.
Yeah,
You mentioned an expert who called him out on this.
right. Elizabeth Pearson, who studies terrorism and counterterrorism at Royal Holloway University of London. She argues that Musk isn't genuinely interested in protecting women. Instead, he's using this issue to protect powerful men and keep things the way they are. You know, those existing power structures we always hear about.
So he's basically cherry-picking a cause that fits his agenda. He's not speaking up for women in other situations, especially if it means going against the grain.
That's Pearson's point. She says Musk hasn't shown much interest in, say, women of color who face abuse,
Oh, wow.
or cases where the abuser is a white man. It makes you think, is this about helping women?
Yeah.
Or is it a calculated move to boost his own image and appeal to a certain audience?
It's giving selective activism vibes for sure. And you mentioned earlier that this whole protector without care thing is straight out of the far-right playbook.
Absolutely. That article from the conversation you sent really digs into this. They explain how this narrative has been used by all sorts of groups.
Okay.
Patriarchal nationalists, even Nazi groups. It's all about reinforcing traditional gender roles,
Yeah.
painting a picture of men as strong protectors and women as weak and needing to be saved.
And often it comes with a hefty dose of racism and xenophobia, right? Like, we need to protect our women from those men.
Exactly. It's about creating an us versus them mentality. And unfortunately, Musk seems to be playing right into that. Think about it. He's going after Jess Phillips, a politician who's dedicated her career to protecting women and children. But at the same time, he's reinstated Tommy Robinson on X.
Wait, really?
You know, the convicted criminal and anti-Islam activist.
Hold on. So he's attacking someone who's actually fighting for women's safety while platforming someone who is known for hate speech.
Right.
Talk about a mixed message.
It's a classic case of double standards, and it fits into this broader trend of tech leaders aligning themselves with these hyper-masculine, often problematic figures. We talked about Zuckerberg pushing for a more masculine company culture.
Yeah.
But it goes even further than that.
You mean like those articles you sent about Andrew Tate?
Yes.
He's become this online guru for a certain kind of young man, promoting a very specific and frankly harmful view of masculinity.
Right. And he's been linked to a surge in misogyny and violence against women, especially in the UK. It's alarming.
Yeah.
And the fact that Musk has reposted Tate's content just gives him more legitimacy and reach.
It normalizes these toxic ideas, making it seem like it's okay to treat women with disrespect and aggression. It makes you wonder, what kind of world are we creating when these are the voices being amplified?
It's a scary thought, and it goes back to that whole race to the bottom we discussed earlier. It's like there's a competition to see who can be the most outrageous, the most provocative, the most alpha. And it's all playing out on social media where outrage equals engagement, and engagement equals profit.
So is this all just a cynical ploy for attention and influence? Is Musk deliberately playing this character, this hypermasculine provocateur, to further his own agenda?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? We can't know for sure what's going on in his head, but we can analyze his actions and see where they lead.
Right.
And what we're seeing is a pattern of behavior that aligns with a certain ideology, a certain worldview that's becoming increasingly mainstream, unfortunately.
And this ideology seems to be spreading beyond national borders. We talked about his involvement in UK politics, but he's also been meddling in Australia, earning himself a public scolding from Prime Minister Albanese.
Right. Albanese basically told him to stay in his lane, saying that Australian elections are a matter for Australians.
Oh, wow.
It's a sign that world leaders are starting to push back against this trend of tech billionaires throwing their weight around on the global stage.
It's like they think they're above the rules, that they can just waltz into any country and dictate their own terms.
Yeah.
But luckily, it seems like people are starting to wake up to this and say, hold on a minute, who elected you?
It's a good sign, but the question is it enough?
Yeah.
These tech giants have so much power, so much influence.
Right.
It's hard to know how to hold them accountable. And that brings us back to the issue of misinformation, something that's been a recurring theme throughout our deep dive today.
Right. We talked about that BBC investigation that completely debunked Musk's claims about a Home Office memo supposedly telling police to ignore grooming gangs.
Yeah.
It was a classic case of misinformation spreading like wildfire online.
And it highlights just how dangerous this can be. When someone with Musk's platform spreads falsehoods,
Yeah.
it can have a real impact on people's perceptions, their beliefs, even their actions. It can sow division, incite hatred, and undermine trust in institutions.
And it's not just him, right?
Yeah.
We're seeing this all over social media with algorithms amplifying extreme content and pushing people towards more radical viewpoints. It feels like we're losing our grip on reality.
Yeah.
Like we're all trapped in these echo chambers where our own biases are constantly being confirmed and reinforced.
It's a disturbing trend and something we need to be very careful about. We need to be critical of the information we consume, to double-check sources, to be willing to challenge our own assumptions. And we need to demand more from these tech companies to hold them accountable for the content that's being shared on their platforms.
So what can we as individuals do to combat this? Feels overwhelming sometimes.
Yeah.
Like we're just tiny boats being tossed around in this vast stormy ocean.
It's a valid feeling, but don't underestimate the power of individual action. We can start by being more mindful of our own online behavior.
Okay.
What are we sharing? Who are we following? Are we contributing to the problem or are we part of the solution?
I like that. It's about taking responsibility, not just for what we consume,
Right.
but also for what we put out into the world.
Yeah. Okay. I think we're reaching a point where we need to zoom out a bit. We've explored Musk's gaming habits, his political maneuvers, his online persona, the dangers of misinformation. Where does all this leave us? What's the big picture here?
That's the question we need to grapple with. But maybe it's time for a quick breather so you, our listener, can catch your breath. We've covered a lot of ground, and we're about to delve into the heart of it all. What does this deep dive truly reveal about Elon Musk and the world we're living in?
All right, we're back. And, after going through all these articles about Elon Musk, I can't help but feel like we've stumbled onto something much bigger than just a gaming controversy. It's like we pulled on a loose thread and ended up unraveling a whole sweater, right? We started with accusations of cheating in video games, and now we're talking about global politics, misinformation, the future of online culture.
Yeah.
It's a lot to process.
It really is. It makes you think, are these just like isolated incidents, or are they symptoms of a deeper problem? Is this just Elon being Elon, or is there something more systemic at play here?
Well, one thing that jumps out from these articles is this blurring of lines between different aspects of life.
Yeah.
A billionaire's hobby suddenly becomes a political football.
Right.
A Twitter feud spills over into international relations.
Yeah.
And a single tweet can send shockwaves through financial markets. It's all connected in a way that it wasn't before.
Yeah, it's like the real world and the online world are kind of merging, and rules are changing faster than we can keep up.
Exactly.
And in this new landscape, individuals like Elon Musk hold immense power.
Yeah.
They can shape narratives, influence opinions, even sway elections with just a few keystrokes.
And that's both exciting and terrifying, isn't it?
It really is.
We've seen how this power can be used for good, like driving innovation, funding important causes, even inspiring a generation to dream bigger. But we've also seen the flip side. The spread of misinformation, the attacks on critics, the alignment with dangerous ideologies.
Like holding this double-edged sword.
Yeah.
It makes me wonder, how do we hold these tech titans accountable?
Right.
They're not elected officials. They don't answer to any traditional authority. So who gets to decide where the line is drawn?
That's the challenge we're facing, and honestly, there's no easy answer.
Yeah.
We're in uncharted territory here, trying to navigate a world where technology is advancing faster than our ability to understand its implications. But one thing's for sure, we can't just sit back and watch as these individuals reshape our world according to their own whims.
So what can we do? It feels like we're up against these massive, powerful forces. What difference can one person really make?
Well, for starters, we need to be more aware, more critical. We need to question the information we're fed, to look for bias, to dig deeper than the surface level. Think of it as like a muscle. We need to develop this muscle of critical thinking.
Right, like training ourselves to see the strings being pulled, to recognize the agendas at play. And it's not just about consuming information. It's about how we share it, too. Are we amplifying these problematic voices? Are we contributing to the spread of misinformation? We need to be mindful of our own role in all of this.
Absolutely. We have more power than we realize. Our choices, our actions, our voices, they all add up. We can choose to support responsible companies, to amplify voices that are fighting for positive change, to hold these tech leaders accountable for their actions. It might feel like a small drop in a vast ocean. But those drops can create a ripple effect.
It's about taking back some of that power, about reclaiming our agency in this digital age.
Right.
And maybe, just maybe, that's the real lesson to be learned from this whole Elon Musk saga. It's a wake-up call, a reminder that we can't afford to be passive observers in this rapidly changing world. We need to engage, to question, to demand better.
And who knows, maybe that's exactly what Elon Musk wants. Maybe this whole controversy was a calculated move, a way to spark a conversation, to shake things up and force us to confront these uncomfortable truths.
It's definitely a thought-provoking idea. Is he a villain, a hero, or something in between? We'll leave that for you, our listener, to decide. But as we wrap up this deep dive, we want to leave you with this. Don't be afraid to question, to challenge, to demand more from those in power. The future is being written right now. And we all have a role to play in shaping it.
And that's the beauty and the burden of the digital age. We have more access to information, more ways to connect and communicate than ever before.
It's true.
It's up to us to use these tools wisely to build a world that we can all be proud of. So stay curious. Stay engaged and keep diving deep.
That's all the time we have for today. Thanks for joining us on this journey.
Yes, thank you.
We'll catch you next time for another deep dive.